Hey guys, Irene here. Today I'm gonna do a Photoshop tutorial as I haven't done one in a while. Some of you might recognize this picture from 4 Photographers Shoot One Model Challenge on Jessica Kobesi's channel. If you haven't watched that video, I will link it in the description down below. A lot of you just wanted to see how I edited this image once I posted it on my Instagram, so I decided why not do this. As you can see, here's the image straight from my camera. This is the raw image. I shot this as usual with my Canon 5D Mark III and my Canon 85mm 1.2. This is shot with just natural light. The studio was completely white, so it was reflecting the light from all of the sides really well. So even though the image is completely backlit, we're still getting a lot of light on the model. And as usual, I shot this wide open, so this let a lot of light into my lens. I'm gonna go ahead and start with camera raw. I always do this at the beginning of all of my editing. I don't really like using Lightroom. I like to edit everything in Photoshop, and since camera raw it's pretty much like Lightroom, that's what I like to do. So I'm using the latest version of Photoshop, which is Photoshop 2018. I'm gonna go into filter and just choose camera raw filter right here, and it's just gonna bring us to, as you can see here, camera raw plugin. If you do not have camera raw plugin for some reason, you can always go to the Adobe website and download the camera raw plugin for free. If you are using a older version of Photoshop, something like CS5 and lower, you will not have this option in your filter. You will have to do it manually. But if you are using a newer version, you should be able to do it just like I'm doing. So yeah, quick tip: if you are using a older version of Photoshop, you can always go into File, Open As, choose the image that you want to edit. I have it right over here, and then right over here on this side you're just going to choose camera raw and then say open, and again your image is just going to open in camera raw. So yeah, I'm going to go into filter, camera raw. So as I mentioned, this is very similar to Lightroom, and I'm going to do just a few adjustments here to help me with my editing. So let's fix the white balance just a little bit. I want to make this a little bit more cool toned, and I also want to bring just a tiny bit of a blush tone in here. So something about this much. Yeah, I really like that. So this is before and after just doing the white balance. I always go ahead and make the image just a little bit more contrasting. We can even bring the exposure up just a touch. I'm gonna go ahead and bring the highlights down because it is pretty overexposed in the background as I was trying to expose for the model here. Let's bring the shadows up just a little bit. And lastly, I go ahead and bring up the clarity. This is going to make our image just a little bit more crisp and define more of the detail in there. Now, when you do play with clarity, a lot of the time it's going to desaturate your image just a little bit. So I go ahead and bring up the vibrance back. Alright, so this is before and after the adjustments in camera raw. Everything looks great, so I'm just going to go ahead and press OK. Now, I don't really like the standard crop. I like to make it a little bit wider. It fits the Instagram a little bit better, and I just like the look that it gives. It kind of fits more detail into the image, in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my crop tool, and I'm going to widen the frame of this image just a little bit, just about that. I'm gonna apply the crop, and now you guys probably have seen me do this trick multiple times, but I'm gonna show it again for anyone that's new. I like to take my marquee tool and I'm going to select this area right here, and we're going to kind of stretch out this area that I just selected to fill in the black space here. So you're going to right click on your selection, choose free transform, right click on the selection again and choose distort. Now I'm going to grab this little square right here and just kind of pull it to the side. Now if you guys notice, if I just pull it to the side straight, it's kind of curving the piano in a natural way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it down just a little bit to continue the straight line here, and it's going to make it look a lot more natural. Okay, like that. That's perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and apply the transformation here, and then I can go ahead, select and deselect the selection. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead, choose this part right here. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not taking her waist into my selection because I do not want to distort that. I'm gonna go ahead, right click on the selection, free transform, right click, distort, and again just kind of move it to this side. Okay, that's great. And I'm gonna go ahead and apply the transformation, select, deselect. Now we have just a little tiny spot right, oops. Now we have a little tiny spot right here at the very top. Very, very easy to correct. I'm gonna go into filter and liquify. I'm going to pick up a pretty big brush and pull it up. Now, what I also want to do is make the dress look a little bit more natural where we distorted it. As you can see right over here, it looks pretty straight. So I'm going to take my brush, make it a little bit smaller, and just kind of curve the dress down a little bit like that, so it looks a lot more natural. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press OK. That looks awesome. Next thing that I usually do is liquefy again, but we're gonna focus this time on her hair. It looks great. The hairstylist did an amazing job doing this hairstyle really quickly, but I want to make this a little bit bigger, give it a little bit more like oomph, and make it just a little bit more symmetrical. I'm a really big fan of symmetry, so I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate my layer. I always do that to make sure that if I did something wrong, I can always go back to the original image. I'm gonna take my background and take it all the way here to make a copy of it. Now I'm gonna go ahead into filter and liquify again, and I'm gonna go ahead and start with the hair. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit bigger. So with my brush, I'm just kind of going around and being very light-handed here. I'm just kind of finessing the hair. I'm changing up the size of my brush with the brackets on my keyboard. And again, I'm just making sure that I'm very light-handed here. It's all about little differences, but the detail is really important to me, so I always make sure that everything is perfect in the image, and I really take my time here. This is what's gonna make your image stand out. All right. I think this is about it, so I'm gonna go ahead and press OK. And yeah, this is the before and after on the hair. I'm gonna go ahead and merge my layers. If you guys don't like to do that, you can always keep them as is, but if you've been following me for a while, you know that I like to merge my layers. I like to keep it really simple and not messy, and it works for me. The next step is the skin retouch. The model Sophia is literally a perfect human being, so there's not much we're gonna be doing here, but I'm gonna clean up some of these spots just a tiny bit. So again, I'm gonna duplicate my layer by just dragging it here and getting a copy of my background layer. I'm gonna zoom in just a little bit, and I love to use a patch tool for my skin editing. Now, if you've never used a patch tool, you would usually have it on the spot healing brush. Just right click on it and select the patch tool. Now, the way that the patch tool works is that you would select the area that has an imperfection and move it to the area with the skin that looks great. I love the patch tool because not only it will, gotta be careful here. But yeah, I love the patch tool not only because it will correct the texture, but also a skin color. So I just absolutely love using patch tool. So yeah, I'm just gonna go around and find spots that I don't like and kind of just correct them right here. Hopefully you guys can see the difference. I also love using the patch tool for the dark shadows under the eye. Gotta be careful here because it does have a tendency to just kind of catch some of the colors that you don't want in there, especially if they're really close to each other. But yeah, with practice, patch tool is very, very easy and it's super quick for me. Now that I'm done with patch tool, I'm gonna do another little trick for skin retouch. I'm gonna take this sampler tool. I'm gonna sample up the area here on the forehead. I'm gonna take up my brush and I'm gonna make it a lot smaller, but still pretty big. Now I always use a soft rounded brush just to make sure that the edges are not harsh. I'm also using a tablet. I'm using a Wacom Intuos small pen and touch, which means that I can easily just apply the pressure with my pen. If you are using just your mouse and not a tablet, I definitely recommend lowering your opacity here to about 20%. But if you do have a tablet, which I highly, highly recommend, if you do like editing and retouch, invest into a tablet. Mine was only around $100, so it's not that expensive really. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of lightly tap onto her forehead. That's going to go ahead and kind of neutralize some of the texture and some of the color on her forehead, make it a little bit more uniform. But again, you have to be very, very light here, and you have to constantly switch up, sampling up the skin. So here around her lip area, I'm going to sample it up, and then again, just lightly tap. I'm going to sample the skin here now, and again, just lightly tap. And sample it right here where she has blush, and again lightly tap. And this is it for the face. So this is before and after. Now if you feel like you've done a little bit too much, you can always go and lower the opacity here and make it look a little bit more natural. So I'm gonna lower it to about 85%. I'm gonna go ahead and also correct the skin on her arm just a tiny bit. I'm gonna sample up the skin here, and then again with the big brush, I'm gonna lightly brush it on her arm, just ever so lightly. Again, this will still leave a lot of the texture in the skin, but will make it look a little bit more uniform and a little bit more clean, so to say. And this is completely up to your preference. Sometimes I leave it more natural. Sometimes I go a little bit more in the editing, the skin editing. So yeah, it's all up to you. Now I feel like I've done a little bit too much here on the arm. So I'm going to go ahead with my eraser tool and just erase it slightly. Just slightly over here. Alright, the skin looks great, so I'm going to go ahead and merge the layers. The next step that I do is dodge and burn, and you guys have probably seen me do this multiple times. So feel free to skip this step, but I'm going to explain this again for everyone that's new to my channel. I like to do my dodge and burn with curves, and I created actions for myself to make my flow a little bit faster and easier. So I'm going to show you guys how to create an action for yourself. And if you don't know what a Photoshop action is, it's an amazing tool that helps you to record everything that you do and apply it multiple times into other pictures as well. It's kind of like creating a preset, if you will, but in Photoshop, not in Lightroom. So I'm going to close it here and show you guys how you can open your actions. You go into the window and you press action, and this little window is going to pop out. As you can see, I've made a lot of actions here for myself. So to record a new action, I'm going to press this button right here. I'm gonna call this just H2 for highlight. And as you press record, this red button is gonna go off, meaning that you're recording everything that you're gonna be doing in Photoshop now. So I'm gonna go ahead into my adjustment layers and choose curves. And I'm gonna bring the curves up about right here. And now I'm gonna press Control I to invert my mask, and I'm gonna stop the recording. This is it. This is your highlight action. So I'm gonna delete this layer and show you guys that if you press on the action that you just created and press play, it's just gonna play the action that we just created. Now, what you can do is you can take your brush, and now you can brush on the highlight onto the areas that you want. Like that. Very, very simple. The same exact way I'm gonna make our shadow action. I'm gonna press this button to create an action. I'm gonna call it shadow. Press record. Go into adjustment layers, curves, and this time I'm gonna take my curve right here and bring it down like that. Again, Control I to invert the mask, stop the recording, and that's it. You already created your shadow action. So I'm gonna go ahead, play it, and as you can see, it just played that quickly what we just created, and you can go ahead and now intensify the shadows on your image, or in other words, burn the image. Yeah, really, really quick. So I'm gonna go ahead, play my own actions that I have here, and you can kind of follow me if you created your own as well. I'm gonna press the highlight action, press play. And the usual places that I like to highlight are just the ones that I already see in the picture. I look where the natural highlight is and I like to intensify it. So I'm going to go right here on the nose. Anywhere that I see the spots that are highlighted, make them a little bit more intense. Again, I like to go ahead and kind of change the size of my brush with the brackets tool. I like to go a little bit bigger than smaller, and then again, because I'm using a tablet, it responds to the pressure that I apply to my pen. If you don't have that, again, I would definitely recommend lowering your opacity here. But if you do have a tablet, it's gonna be a lot easier for you. So yeah, anywhere that I see already a natural highlight, I just intensify it. All right, so this is after the highlight, that's before and after. Now I always like to go ahead and kind of lower the opacity just a little bit so it's not as intense and unnatural. You want to make sure that everything that you do is very, very subtle. We want subtle changes, not a very unnatural looking highlight. So I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna go back to my background layer and play my shadow action now, and this time I'm going to focus on the shadows in the picture in the same way that I did with my highlights. I just want to intensify them. I like to go and kind of go around the body, kind of intensify the lines here, the contour of the body. Again, I like to kind of switch around with different sizes for my brush. If I did something too much, I can always go to the eraser tool and kind of erase it. Now let's go into the face. I love to go right in the eyelashes and almost individually intensify each lash. Just like that with a very, very small brush. And again, you guys, I'm always using a soft rounded brush to avoid any harsh edges. I even like to go kind of around the eye to make it a little bit more crisp. You really want to focus on the eyes, especially if you are a portrait photographer. And I'm gonna go ahead with the really small brush, also intensify the eyebrows. Again, I just like to almost create little individual hair strokes here. Like I said, I'm very, very into detail. I sometimes even like to go ahead and intensify some of the like birthmarks right here. I really like those. Now, let's go here on the lip. I always go underneath the lip. That creates kind of like a shadow underneath it, underneath the lower lip, and makes it look bigger. If you guys are into makeup, this is very, very similar to contouring with makeup. Trying to create almost like an illusion. I'm gonna go ahead around her nose here as well. All right, so that's great. So let's see the before and after on the shadow. As you can see, we just made some of the features stand out a little bit more, and it makes it look a little bit more crisp, a little bit more 3D. I'm gonna go ahead, lower the opacity just a little bit though, because again, I don't want it to be too intense. All right, and I think I'm gonna take out some of the shadow here on the lips. It was a little bit too much for my liking. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and merge the curves together. That looks great. Now I'm gonna go ahead and play with the selective color just a little bit. There's not much I want to change here because it looks quite great, but there's a few things here. So I'm gonna go into adjustment layer, selective color. I'm gonna make the yellow a little bit more yellow. Now in the reds, I'm gonna make them a little bit more yellow, even a little bit magenta, and a little bit, yeah, a little bit brighter like that. And let's add a little bit of the red back in there. Perfect. Now magentas, I want to make them more magenta. Whites, I'm gonna bring them up just a little bit and add a little bit of yellow and magenta into the whites. Again, it's gonna create almost like a little bit of that blush glow to the image. All right, so this is it. This is after the selective color. It's just a very, very slight difference, but I can definitely see it on my screen. And I'm really into little details like that. I'm gonna go ahead and merge the layers here. And now I'm gonna do the final steps here. I like to go back into my camera raw and play with the exposure of the model and the background on different layers. I'm gonna explain it a little bit more. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate my layer here. I'm gonna go into filter, camera raw filter. Now I'm looking only at the model. I'm ignoring the background while I'm doing this. So I'm only seeing what it does to the model right now. I want to make her a little bit brighter, a little bit more contrasting. Again, take the shadows up just a little bit, and clarity, just a little bit of clarity, and maybe, yeah, a little bit of vibrance. Okay, so that's it. I'm gonna press OK. Now I want to apply what I just did only to the model and avoid the background. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a layer mask. I'm gonna press this little button right here, create a layer mask. Then I'm gonna press Control I to invert it. So now I can pick up my brush and I can paint what I just did only to the spots that I want. So it's gonna be only the model. So I'm picking up my brush, making it pretty big, and painting it on top of the model. I'm gonna avoid her dress right here because I want to keep more of the detail there, and I don't want to make it too bright. That's it. I applied it only to the model. So this is before and after here. That looks great. I'm gonna merge the layers here, and now I'm gonna do a very similar thing but only apply my action to the background. So I'm gonna duplicate the background, go into filter, camera raw. Now for the background, I want to make it just a little bit darker. The model will always stand out when the background is a little bit darker than her. That's why we usually want to expose for the model. So I'm gonna lower the highlights here. lower the exposure just a tiny bit. We can even go ahead and play with whites here, but it's making it too gray. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Okay, that's perfect. I'm going to press OK. And now I'm going to go ahead again, create my layer mask, Control I to invert. I'm going to pick up my brush and only paint it to the spots that I want to. Just pretty much the window. All right, so this is before and after. That looks great. So I'm going to go ahead and merge my layers. So this is pretty much it. The last step that I do is I sharpen the image just a little bit more. If you guys would like to know how I do that, I have a whole separate video on how I sharpen the images. So I will just link it in the description down below. This is the action that I've made. And again, if you watch the video, you will be able to make the same action. I just play my action and it sharpens the image. Let me just zoom it out and show you guys exactly how sharp it gets. This is before and after. I did miss the focus on this one just a tiny bit. It focused more on her hand right here rather than her eyes. But again, with doing a little bit of a sharpening, you can bring back a lot of the details into the image. So I'm going to leave the sharpening here. I'm going to go ahead, merge my layers, and I'm going to save the image for the web use. I'm going to go into File, Export, Save for Web. If you've noticed that you're saving the images and they don't look the same on your Instagram feed as they do on your computer, make sure you always press here convert to sRGB. That will make sure that the colors look the same. This is something that I myself didn't know about. And a lot of the times when I would post the image, it would look completely wrong. So now since I do this, the images look exactly the same as on my computer, on my Instagram feed. So I do this, convert to sRGB, and I'm just going to save the image. All right, so this is pretty much it. Let's see the before and after. So there's before and after, before and after. I quite like the coloring and the before image as well, the really warm glow, but I do prefer my after image. I just think it makes it look a lot more clean, and I love the little blush glow that I gave to the image. I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Make sure you give it a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!